My name's Ollie Bliss and this is my channel Book Draw. For those who don't know, I enjoy looking at queer fiction and occasionally I create images out of them. Today I am doing a kind of massive catch-up, seeing as it's been about a month since I've bothered to make a video. It's Christmas and winter and I was having a time off, basically. I actually saw on Instagram someone posted something saying depressed is really deep rest, and I think I was definitely in deep rest mode rather than being depressed. Though I certainly have just felt more lethargic, and it's meant that I'm now coming at you with lots of new energy and lots of things to say, because I have read a lot. I have not read the things that I aim to do over the course of the last couple of months, and I am kind of catching up all the way from November, when I was doing the kind of Autumn Readathon, through to the Queer Readathon, and although I'd set out TBRs for both of them, I managed to achieve some of the things which I initially set out to do, but the things that I ended up reading are very, very different. I've also DNF'd a couple, so I'll go through those first, because they're just less interesting, aren't they? And I'll just explain the reasons why I DNF'd them. Starting with, and this might surprise some people, Elmet, which is by Fiona Mozley. I have got through to chapter 6 on this bad boy, and I've stopped and started it a few times, and just on a very personal level, I'm not into the style of the writing. I just can't tune into it. I'm not feeling the characters, I'm not feeling what they're all about and what they're up to. I ended up actually cheating and just checking on Wiki to see if it was worth me investing as much as I had done. If I was going to be interested in the rest of the story, and turns out not so much. The next one which I DNF'd is Sabrina by Drnaso. So for me, this one just, again, didn't fulfill me with the warm and fuzzies, and I couldn't connect with the story at all. I think also on a kind of artistic level, I didn't appreciate this kind of reducted style of illustration, where it's very plain, I feel, and like the line-based drawings kind of are muted, the palette tones are all completely muted throughout the book, and it's partly to do with the storyline itself in terms of what's happened to Sabrina. The features of the people are just very simple in terms of facial features and hair and backdrops and everything, but for me, like, those are the elements which I really enjoy in a graphic novel, and because it lacked those kind of nourishing visual stimulus for me, it relies on really intriguing, exciting dialogue, and I didn't think the dialogue was actually that captivating, and it just kind of made me feel depressed and slow, and I just couldn't keep going with it. The last book which I want to kind of moan about is Mausoleums Island, which is by Sarah Day, and again this was another one which was on the Pluralist Shortlist prize. I went into this book being really excited by it. I started reading it in October and it took me all the way until December to read. My partner was like, "You have been nursing that book for some time now." And I was like, yeah, I really have. But because the book itself chops and changes from a period of a couple of years, where you're going back from, I think it's 1938 to up to 1941, I think it goes up to. But it kind of goes back and forth. It's focusing on true life events of where these 45 men were captured for being homosexual. They were referred to as the Ursula or the Familia, and they were put on the San Domino Island basically because they were considered a contagion by the fascist regime, because if you were homosexual you would basically incite cowardice amongst other men. So the whole idea of it was by putting these 45 men in, basically protected masculinity on a much wider level. So really interesting period of time, and what I really did enjoy and thought was really cool about the book is there's lots of quotes and different citations from actual parts of history. So all of that was really, really cool, but what I felt was lacking was how the story actually developed. And how it was handled towards the end was just a bit disappointing for me. the pacing, I felt that there were issues there. I felt like it could have been edited down quite a lot. Also, I felt like some of the reveals were just overstretched, and they could have happened more naturally or just in a different way. And just ultimately, it was just a little draining again. Like it's not a pleasant read. It doesn't go into towards a pleasant ending either, and it was just hard work from beginning to end. It felt like it was a bit muddled and a bit like meandering, and it didn't kind of develop properly. It just kind of sat there. And I think part of that is about the fact that they were held captive and prisoner in that state, but it just didn't do enough for me, basically. So that's my last one to moan about. Next one which I want to discuss is Dark Matter, a ghost story by Michelle Paver. So this one is just like a cool little ghost story. It's only like 250 pages long, I think. But if you just want to kind of freak yourself out, this worked. This worked for me. Basically, you follow Jack, who's going on this expedition. They're going up from Norway up into this fictional location where they're going to study weather patterns and stuff in the Arctic. Each of the characters end up like one after another leaving this cabin, so he ends up by himself, and some freaky stuff happens, and because he's all alone, he is isolated and he is alone, and he is just trying to get through because he actually desires this one of his teammates called Gus, who kind of set this whole thing up, and he wants to be there for him and collect these measurements and like be the hero, and it's actually kind of manipulative. When I was reading it, I was like, because he's saying, we couldn't be doing this without you, and it becomes known that like he was kind of freaking out about the situation that they were in, and he's totally abandoned him there, and it feels a bit unfair, but you do root for Jack. You want him to do well, you want him to survive the course. It does come to a cool crescendo, and it is like, it's incremental, it's insidious, it does all those things that a classic ghost story does, and I was sold by it. The last 100 pages just worked really well. I've never been so scared by just like a post, which sounds really stupid and weird, but when you read this, like, it makes sense. Like this post is doing stuff, and it's not fair, it's not fun. The next one, which I did as a buddy read, which is The History of Violence by Edvard Lewis. I did this with Shawn the Book Manic, and it was a real pleasure to do that with him. This is quite like a brutal read, and the pair of us knew it would be, because it's dealing with the issues of rape, and it really does encapsulate what actually happened and then the aftermath of it. And I'm aware that this actually happened to the writer, and it is more of a kind of like a memoir of the events in itself in a lot of ways. So it feels like a tricky thing to discuss or talk about, and me and Shawn were quite open with each other in terms of how we were going to approach the book, and I think that really helped. But it was useful just to actually have somebody else to kind of check how you should feel, or what you're experiencing as you go through that process, because in parts it is quite graphic. Go through the person who has been raped, you kind of go through their eyes, and then you kind of go through the eyes of his sister, and then it's almost done in like a third person summary, and it plays with language in a really, really brilliant way in the way a story is told, but it also makes you feel very connected to the feelings that they go through as they're processing what has happened to them, and how they feel about the person who raped them, and the desire to kind of talk about that person endlessly, or the events that happened, almost to the point where you are driving other people around you insane because you keep on repeating it. It also looks at things around conscious bias and racism of the police force and the way that they treat the person, Reda, who rapes this guy, but also how other people can sympathise but not necessarily fully understand the experience of the person who's being raped, and how they can actually act quite senselessly towards them or about them as they try and act in a supportive way. It's a short novella, but it was a very intense read, and I was very glad to do it with Shawn, because I think that was really helpful for me in terms of having someone to soundboard against about what was actually happening and how it was happening. The next one which I want to talk about is Heart's Invisible Furies, which is by Boyne. So this, I just love this book. I won't go into this one too much because I'm going to talk more about it in terms of my top favourites for 2018, but this I'd definitely say was one of my tops. I loved the characters throughout the book. Some of them are a little bit Dickensian, but in just a brilliant way. It goes from 1940s, set in Ireland, up to present day. You follow Cyril Avery, who's not a real Avery, and that's because he's basically adopted by Roger and Maud is my favourite character which I've read through 2018. I just love her on so many different levels. But if you just want a really good, solid read, the next book which I want to talk about is The Rest of Us Live Here, which is by Patrick Ness. I really enjoyed this book. It focuses on Mikey, who's a little bit of an awkward, shy, anxious individual who is trying to just work his way through to graduation. He's got a bit of a crush on Henna, who's his older sister's best friend. And he also, interestingly, has a bit of attraction for his best friend, who is kind of like realised he's only just kind of attracted to, but there was a bit of a flirtation in partially for him, or a process which he went through for his best friend Jared, who is this half god jock character. So some of those things that I was exploring was just well handled. I thought it was quite cool. What I liked about The Rest of Us Live Here is that he is a character who isn't like a leading man. It's actually about the rest of the people who are not attached to like a hero versus villain situation, and they are just trying to survive and live through life. And it reminded me in some way of Austin Powers, like every time someone died and how they would go back to like the family.
Husband is a henchman in Dr. Evil's private army.
Thanks for calling.
Hi, Mom.
Sit down, Billy.
It reminded me of that setup. Like, you are following one of the non-characters in a book and just living through their life, which I just thought was cool. Next one which I want to talk about is the true history of the Kelly gang. Now, this is really like left field one for me to read, but I was talking with a colleague about like those different books which you read at high school or were forced to, and he was saying that he hated this book because it had no sentence structure and it was all about narration and things that happened, and it was just like a painful read. And I don't know what, I think it was just the fact that it was based on a real life character, Ned Kelly, who was part of this gang, and how he became like this leader of this gang that kind of drew me in and made me go, oh, I might be interested in that story actually. But I ended up listening to it on audio through my library because they had a copy, and I was just like, I'm going to give this a go actually. I know you didn't like this experience, but I'm gonna give it a go, and I really enjoyed it actually. So Ned Kelly is from like he gets first imprisoned when he's like 15, and you see the evolution of his personality and the things that happen around him. They aren't particularly wealthy at all. They're quite poor, and because of the situations that they face, he ends up basically stealing and committing different crimes. But that escalates and evolves, and he keeps on getting these run-ins with the law, and that's all really interesting to listen to and to follow. And you just see an evolution of an outlaw and a maverick who basically just decides to shape the world for himself or live on his own terms, which ultimately ended up in this big shootout. And there's actually a museum in Australia dedicated to the Kelly gang, and I'll show you just some images of the armour which they wore, because that really like drew me in as well. I was really surprised by just who they were, but it's definitely something I would recommend other people reading. And it was much easier because I was just listening to it. You really got the sense of the person, the way in which they talked, and because he's kind of talking to his daughter. He wants to explain what happened to him, the events that he followed through, and I just thought the book was really, really nicely handled, but it felt very authentic in terms of what had happened and the events that happened, and it felt like it was a true story, even though it's a fictionalized version of events. The next book which I want to talk about is The Left Hand of Darkness. So this is one which I read from doing the kind of sci-fi queer readathon. This is a speculative fiction. What I particularly enjoyed about this book is the role of this ambisexual race, where this traveller has come down and he's trying to negotiate this kind of new partnership on an intergalactic level where they can come and join in, but he's blockaded by the kind of political structure of the planet and their distrust to why they should want to get involved. And he meets this ambisexual character, and they form a friendship, but there's a lot of distrust right at the start of the story, because the character's exiled. They then form a relationship and a friendship afterwards, where they come together and they're traipsing through the kind of planet, and he ends up getting rescued by this exiled person, and it's all about that the political tensions and the structure of the culture of the society. What I really liked about the story is that it's handled with a lens of looking at the role of gender and the how people function in society, and how there can be cultural values which clash with each other. And it was really more of an exploration of those themes, but I just thought it was a really cool, well-written, powerful read. The next one which I read was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So we went into a bit of a fantasy spiral, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It focuses on the lead character called Jude, who is this mortal girl who's trapped in the land of the fairies. She's part of this royal court, and she's got at school. She's seen as this kind of, it's almost like a class distinction between humans and fairies, because fairies are supposed to be immortal. They have all these like powers where they can create influence and magic on mortal beings. So she's completely outclassed by this fairy race, but it's how she competes against them, and she wants to become a part of the knights, and she basically stands up to this bully, this cruel prince, and it's about her fight towards that. But what I liked about the way this book has evolved and the way her character has developed, she actually becomes a bit of an anti-hero, and instead of like being this person who rivals and overcomes these impossible beings, it's how she plays a different type of game, and it's looking at a female character in a very different and kind of dark light. And I was really, really drawn to Jude and the way she talks about vengeance, and it's not like she's not giving you warm and fuzzies at all. She's actually quite aggressive, assertive and ruthless, and you can see the struggle ethically of the things that she's facing. But what I'm really interested in the way it's set up for the next book, which is out really soon. I think it's like on the 13th of January, and it's called The Wicked King. Very excited to pounce on that book and get it as soon as it comes out, because I just enjoyed the ride. So yeah, brand new year, looking forward to what is next. Come back soon, because I will be giving you some all the joy of 2018, and looking forward to what will be happening moving on in 2019. I hope you've all had a wonderful Christmassy rest, and that you're excited for this new year. I feel like 2018 was a bit of a shoddy year, and 2019 feels like it's going to be a good year. Anyway, take care of yourselves. I'll see you all again real soon. Right, bye!